Dragon Ball Raging Blast, a series of Dragon Ball games created by the same people who made the Budokai Tenkaichi series, my favorite Dragon Ball video game series of all time. And this series was created as a spiritual successor for the Budokai Tenkaichi series, but not for that generation's newest consoles. So of course these games were now on better hardware, which of course meant that these games had the potential to do even more than what the Tenkaichi games did. As much as that hurts to say. Don't worry, Tenkaichi 3. You're still my favorite. But did these games ever end up succeeding the Tenkaichi games? I don't know. Let's find out. And of course, we're gonna start off with the first Dragon Ball Raging Blast.
Holy shit, dude!
I'm fucking dead, dude. I'm fucking dead, dude.
So first things first, combat. And of course, being a spiritual successor to the Tenkaichi games, the combat is pretty much the same. Of course, we still got Dragon Rush clashes, and beam struggles, which are now called skirmishes, I think, and super and ultimate attacks, which look just as cool as ever. Although there are some new mechanics thrown in, like Super Rising, which allows you to just skyrocket into the air. There's also the snap attacks and ki blasts, which you have to time pretty much perfectly, and I guess they do just a little bit more damage. You can now also deflect energy beams, which is a lot cooler than just simply blocking or dodging it. And you can also do an attack that hits overhead. There's also an ability you can pull off when the enemy is like knocked down on the ground or something, although it varies between characters. Like some characters can grab them by the feet and throw them. And then there's Vegeta, who just knees them in the nuts. And there are also signature skills,
You finna die?
Oh, fuck.
which are completely different for every character.
Yoink.
And these are really good for making every character's moveset feel special, aside from everyone having, their own unique, special, and ultimate attacks. Although you do have to experiment and find out how you can make it fit into your combo efficiently.
Bring that ass here, Billy!
But probably the coolest new mechanic is the ability to crash enemies into walls.
Stop.
Although it is kind of situational because you could only do it on certain walls in specific stages. And there's also a chance that you can knock opponents into walls if you hit them at a specific angle, but you pretty much have to get lucky to pull this off. So it's not something that you're going to be consistently pulling off on purpose. It is cool though.
Can't even fucking move!
There's also a mechanic that's exclusive to team battles where if someone tries to switch out, the opponent can choose to intercept them, and you'll both get into this little sequence of quick time events where whoever pulls off the most successfully will send the opponent flying right after the switch, and it doesn't really do damage, but it does nicely set you up for a super attack. And it's also really cool because it's something that you'd see from like an actual Dragon Ball fight. Another thing that's exclusive to team battles are team ultimates, which you can activate when you put certain characters up against each other. And if you pull off the right button inputs when activating a super attack, you'll trigger this cool ass cutscene that's a very nice reference to the way the move was used in the anime. So yeah, overall the gameplay is a pretty good evolution of the Tenkaichi style of combat. Although my biggest problem with this game's gameplay is the camera. I don't know what the fuck happened with this camera, but we went straight back to Tenkaichi 1, because this camera is god awful sometimes. If you and an opponent ever get next to a wall, the camera is probably just gonna straight up break, and it gets really annoying. Aside from that though, combat, it's pretty good. Now let's go over the story mode, and surprise surprise, it goes over the Z story yet again. Who could have seen that coming? Okay, but no, the story mode is actually pretty cool. So obviously it goes from Raditz all the way to Kid Buu, with some arcs from the TV specials and movies thrown in there. And there are even some filler fights from the Z anime, and that's pretty cool.
Raccoon of the Guinea Force! Ha! What the fuck was that?
And there's a star shop where you have to earn stars by replaying through the missions and completing some objectives. And you can use these stars to buy stuff like alternate costumes or even some new missions. But easily the best part of this story mode are the what if scenarios. And yeah, a lot of Dragon Ball games have these, but the ones in this game are really good. These have full-on storylines attached to them, and really cool interactions between the characters fighting, like this one where Bardock meets his grandchildren.
I am your grandfather.
You're not my dad!
And beats the shit out of them. And this one where Gogeta and Vegito fight to find out who is the stronger fusion, and depending on who you use, you get a completely different ending. The Vegito one is really funny though.
I've got to admit, the Patara earrings are really something, but you're going to have to stay that way forever. How do you plan on explaining this to Chi-Chi and Bulma?
But easily the best what if scenario in this game is...
Now, to prove to everyone just who really is the greatest warrior alive!
That's right, this game finally gave us Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. And it's not just him.
What the scallop?
Super Saiyan 3 Broly. What the fuck? I don't know what they were on when they made this guy, but they fucking cooked. And I'm pretty sure that this and Raging Blast 2 are the only games that these two are in, or at least like in the console games. And that by itself adds quite a bit of uniqueness to these games. And just, how can you not love Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta and Broly? But of course there are also other game modes as well, like the World Tournament mode is still here, and it's pretty much how it is in every other Dragon Ball game. It's just a tournament. Although it is a little disappointing that there are less tournament types than there were in Tenkaichi 3, since this game only has the World Tournament and the Cell games. But I do like how you can actually hear the announcers during the fights. That's pretty funny.
Well done! I always knew my top apprentice could handle it. Huh?
And you can also unlock new moves by playing these, so that's also nice. And there's also Super Battle Trial, which houses a bunch of little tiny mini games within it, like Survival where you have to fight 50 enemies back to back, or team battles that have different themes. I love blowing myself up. What the fuck? And this one where you punch the punching bag. Yeah, this is a thing. And collecting the Dragon Balls in this game is actually pretty unique. In a lot of Dragon Ball games, you find the Dragon Balls by finding them hidden in like secret spots, like in the stages during fights or something. But in this game, it has its own dedicated game mode, and all you really have to do is just fight a random opponent and you get one. And of course, once you get all 7 Dragon Balls, you'll be able to summon Shenron. And he'll let you wish for secret items like new moves, and it's pretty cool. And finally, let's go over this game's ultimate customize feature. And it's pretty similar to how the customize feature is in the Tenkaichi games. You can customize your characters and give them stat boosts and stuff. And there's also certain skills that let you modify a character's super moves, like this one that amplifies Goku's Spirit Bomb into the Super Spirit Bomb. And speaking of modifying special moves, what is probably the coolest feature is the ability to customize your character's special moves, which is just a really cool new addition to the Tenkaichi gameplay style. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to cover in Raging Blast 1. Overall, it's a really good Dragon Ball game, and it has a lot of really cool stuff that improves upon the Tenkaichi formula, with my only real gripes with this game being just the relatively small downgrade in the roster size compared to Tenkaichi 3's, and the relatively small number of stages there are. Oh, and of course the camera being terrible. But this is the first game in the new series, so it kind of gets a pass. And of course, a lot of this stuff does get improved upon in the sequel.
Take your chance, be now. In my maze, I'm never alone. How can we dance? We can't. Ichika, Bashika, take a heart to let us know. How to see you in nothing. Survive.
And of course, being a direct sequel to Raging Blast 1, the combat is pretty much the same, but with a few tweaks to make it flow more smoothly. The crashing system returns, signature skills are still here, we still have team ultimates, and you can still deflect energy blasts, overheads, knockdown grabs, and the interception system all come back. Oh yeah, and this game also introduced a rolling mechanic, which basically helps you recover after getting launched if you mash the buttons fast enough. And you can also super dash after it, so it's pretty good at keeping the flow going. But the most significant addition to this game's combat is Raging Soul. If you charge all the way up, you'll gain the ability to go into Raging Soul mode, where you basically become a fucking god. The sky goes dark and your character gets a purple aura around them. And while you're in this mode, you can't use super or ultimate attacks, but in exchange you do an insane amount of damage. And there are specific sets of combos for each character, and if you pull those off perfectly, you can pretty much delete the enemy's health bar with one single combo. And there is some actual timing to these combos. I mean, obviously it's not like some Dragon Ball FighterZ TOD shit, but there is some timing for these, so it does add another layer of depth to the combat, and it's a really cool mechanic that I think was only ever included in this game. And this game also fixed my biggest problem with Raging Blast 1's gameplay, which was the camera, and the camera finally got fixed, and thank God, because that shit was fucking horrible. So all of the little tweaks and additions that this game made make the combat of Raging Blast 2 probably the best combat we've seen from any of the Raging Blast or Tenkaichi style of games, and it's overall just pretty good. Although I do have one little nitpick that I really just want to throw out there. I think that this game actually looks worse than Raging Blast 1.
I'm gonna knock you out.
Jesus Christ.
The first game had this cel-shaded look to it that made it look pretty close to the anime, and it was really impressive. But this game just throws that out the window and goes with this new art style, and I just really do not like it. Everything just looks so shiny and it just looks really bad on some characters. Like, look at Raditz. Look at his fucking hair, man. What is that? I don't know, I might be in the minority on this, but just saying, I think the first game actually looks better than this one. But now let's talk about this game's story mode, which isn't really a story mode, but it kind of is. This game's story mode is called Galaxy Mode, and it's kind of similar to the story mode of Budokai 3, where you go through all of the fights of Dragon Ball Z, but through the perspective of each and every character. And each of these fights has some sort of condition or objective, like beating a certain amount of enemies or seeing how many hits you can land within a time limit, or starting at near death with 0 fucking health.
Man, I'm dead.
Yeah, there's a lot of these. You can negate a lot of these handicaps though with the ultimate customized system, which does return in this game. Although the cool little Tetris looking thingy is gone, so that kinda sucks. And this stuff does add a bit of variety to the usual fights that we see over and over again from the Z story. Although, to be honest, I do think that this is kind of a downgrade from Raging Blast 1 story mode, because although we do get some what if fights thrown in there aren't any real cutscenes, so we don't get to see any special interactions between the characters, aside from just the regular character intros at the beginning of the match.
Super Saiyan 3? So what?
And you can actually activate special dialogue between certain characters during fights, although I think this is only between very few characters. And it kinda sucks because a lot of the charm came from just seeing these characters interacting and the original stories that were being told from Raging Blast 1's what if scenarios. So to just see it be gone from this game is kind of disappointing, if I'm being honest. And look, I get it, it gets pretty tiring doing the same story over and over again, but I don't know why they couldn't just come up with an original story like Fighters and Xenoverse kinda did. So taking all of the cutscenes away just feels kind of bland. This mode is where you collect the Dragon Balls though, and I'm not sure if this was in the first game, but if you're really lucky, you can actually summon Purunga, and he grants you 3 wishes.
Okay.
There is another new game mode though, and that's Battle Zones, which is kind of similar to Galaxy Mode, where you basically get into these little mini gauntlets, and you fight multiple enemies along this pathway, until you eventually reach the boss of that zone.
I'm fucking dead, dude. I'm fucking dead, dude.
And in each of these zones you get a little handicap put on you, and there are some optional objectives you can complete for items like still images from the anime, which would be pretty cool, I guess, if you couldn't just, you know, watch the anime or use Google. And once you eventually beat all of the battle zones, you will gain access to the ultimate battle zones, which are basically just harder ones. And as far as I can tell, beating these gives you enhanced characters, which are basically customized versions of the character you were using, but now equipped with the most overpowered items in the game. So basically like the Red Pitara characters from Tenkaichi 3. And aside from that, there's only the World Tournament mode, which is exactly how it was in Raging Blast 1. Yeah, kind of a bummer that they didn't add any alternate tournaments. Although it is pretty cool that they added in the ring out option, since that wasn't in Raging Blast 1. Oh, and before I forget to mention, remember that whole thing with Budokai 3's music and the whole plagiarism thing? Yeah, it happened again with this game. Kenji Yamamoto try not to plagiarize challenge. Impossible. So in some newer copies of this game, the music is completely replaced with the soundtrack of Tenkaichi 2, and it's a real shame because the original soundtrack of this game had some absolute bangers on it. Overall, Raging Blast 2 is a pretty good Dragon Ball game that pretty much perfected the Tenkaichi formula, and it pretty much improved upon my issues with the first game, with this game adding even more stages and even more characters and even some really interesting ones.
Hi.
Yeah, Tarble is in this game. Does anyone remember this guy? which is really cool because I think that this is the only Dragon Ball game to have Tarbell included on the roster. And although he has a pretty basic moveset, I really like his ultimate. That shit's pretty funny.
What the actual?
And another interesting newcomer is this guy.
What is that?
So this game comes with a remake of the Plan to Eradicate the Saiyans OVA, and unlike playing the Galaxy mode to unlock him like every other character, to unlock Hachiyak you have to watch the entire thing, or you can just skip it like I did.
Bruh.
And it's just such a weird part of this game. I don't know, it's just weird. So now that we've gone over both Raging Blast games, did they end up succeeding the Tenkaichi series? I think they did, but to a certain extent. Gameplay wise, yeah, I think that these games blow the Tenkaichi series out of the water, and all of the previous mechanics were pretty much refined to perfection, while also adding some new mechanics that, although a bit janky here and there, are really cool new mechanics that I really hope get implemented into the new Tenkaichi game. And speaking of stuff that I really want to get put into Tenkaichi 4, I really hope that these games' customized features get put into Tenkaichi 4, because I really like the feature of being able to customize your character's special moves, and I just hope that the new Tenkaichi game has as much polish as these games did, especially as much as Raging Blast 2's combat. But although the combat of these games does exceed Tenkaichi's, I don't feel like they succeed everywhere else though. A lot of what I feel made the Tenkaichi games so special was just the sheer charm surrounding them. Every little piece of those games felt like they had love put into them. Like there were so many parts of them that did not need to be there, but the fact that they were just showed how much passion was put into those games. And although some of that charm is there, especially in Raging Blast 1, by the time we get to Raging Blast 2, it's pretty much gone. And it's just little things like that that made the Tenkaichi games feel special to me. And another aspect that I feel like these games didn't really live up to from Tenkaichi standards are the character rosters. Because although Raging Blast 2 does have a lot of characters and a good amount of stages, there's not really nearly as many as there were in Tenkaichi 3. Not to mention that neither of these games even have GT characters. And look, okay, I get it, GT, non-canon, whatever. But to not even include Super Saiyan 4 Goku or Vegeta or Gogeta?
The fuck?
It's kind of crazy to me. And although there are some very cool and unique characters in these games, the overall step down in variety from the Tenkaichi games is a little bit disappointing. And yeah, I understand, I might be a little bit biased because I grew up with the Tenkaichi games, so I might just be a little bit nostalgia blinded. So although they're good, the Raging Blast games don't really replace the Tenkaichi games for me, but they are definitely still games that I had a wait for it, a Raging Blast with.
Take a chance, be my
Let me tell you something before I destroy you. This is Super Saiyan 3.